I had a really good question today, and that was from someone who was asking about learning to improvise, and he wanted to know what order he should learn things. Now, I really like it because this is a big picture question. This is about what you do over the weeks and the months in order to develop your skills as an improviser. This is not about a single technique. Now, like most things, there are many ways of approaching this, but what I thought I'd do is structure how I would put together a lesson plan, if you like, for someone who wanted to learn to play blues and rock. So the starting point for me would be the pentatonic scale, and just getting that first position and understanding how to use that in a major and a minor context, just understanding how the notes fit together. Add the blue note as well. And as I say, start playing against chords as well, so you can actually hear the notes against the harmony that you're playing against, because that's really key to everything, really. And as you get used to this first position, add the other positions as well. And there are 4 others, so there's 5 positions in the pentatonic scale that you can learn. And figure out how to move between them, figure out which positions you like the best, which positions you like the worst, and understand the strengths and weaknesses of each one. I've covered this in other videos as well, so I'd check those out as well if I were you. But once you've got that kind of working, the next stage for me is to add the extra notes that you get in the major and the minor scale. So there's my pentatonic, and there are an extra 2 notes per octave in the major and the minor scale. So there's one there, there's the second one. But learning them in the context of the pentatonic scale, and you'll start to understand how to use those notes. I remember for me, it was quite hard for me to figure out where to use that 4th, for example, whereas the 7th was a lot easier for me. But understanding that and learning how those notes fit over the top of the pentatonic scale, and how the major scale fits against the pentatonic scale as well, that's the key thing, really. And around the same time, it's worth starting to understand chord tones as well, and where they fit. So there's my major chord that fits over the top of that. So I know where those chord tones are. Now we're learning arpeggios, we're not learning them to sweep pick or to play them rapidly up and down. What we're doing is we're learning where they are in order to target certain notes. And so, and it's worth understanding where at least the root chord is, the 4th and the 5th chord is. So there's my 4th chord, or the subdominant. There's my pentatonic. That's where my subdominant is, where my dominant is. And these start to allow me to understand how the scales, the pentatonic and the major scale, fit over the top of each chord. I understand the relationship of the notes that I'm playing against the harmony that I'm playing in the background. And you may find, if you've been improvising up until this point, when you start to actually dissect the chord tones, you start to realise you've been actually targeting them through the improvisations you've been playing, even though you may not necessarily have known that these were chord tones. If you're experimenting with the scales, you'll start to discover that some of these notes sound nicer than others when played over some chords. And once you start to understand where the chord tones are, you can start to understand why they sound nicer. But I actually like the idea of you discovering it yourself and understanding the sound of them, rather than learning the arpeggios and understanding the mechanics of the music. because this is much more about bringing out your own voice than it is about rigidly sticking to one chord structure or another and playing the chord tones in that. At least that's how I prefer to work on this. But anyway, once you've got the major and the minor and you've got some understanding of the harmonies that you're playing against, the next thing I'd do is I'd start to introduce some of the other modes as well of the major and the minor scale. You don't necessarily need to know all of them, but for example, there are certain modes that you use more than others. Like for example, the Dorian mode. If you're playing over a minor sound, you can often use the Dorian rather than the Aeolian mode. But again, learning the modes in the context of the pentatonic scale that you've already been working on is a great way of understanding how the modes work. So for example, I can start, if I'm playing, I don't know, C major. That's where I play my pentatonic in C major. Or what about the Lydian mode? Well, in the Lydian mode, I can play exactly the same pentatonic, and the Lydian sound comes out of the other two notes, if you like. So there's my sharp 4. So the pentatonic scale that I play over the Lydian mode is exactly the same, but the Lydian sound comes out of the other two notes that I add. And similarly with the Mixolydian, there's my C major. I can play exactly the same pentatonic, but I use a flattened 7th. The other two notes that you add, that is the difference between the pentatonic and the major scale, is what makes the mode sound like the mode. And it's exactly the same with the minor sounds as well. So there's my A minor, my minor 7th pentatonic. If I wanted to play the Dorian mode, play exactly the same pentatonic, but I add an F sharp instead of an F natural over an A Dorian. And the Phrygian is just the same. I'd introduce a B flat, but the pentatonic that I'm using is exactly the same. The Phrygian sound comes from the other two notes that I'm adding. And once you've starting to understand this, once you've got a handle on all of those things, this is the point where you can really move on to the next stage of understanding how to improvise. You can start to steer your own direction, you can start to add other scales, the harmonic minor, the melodic minor, you can add other arpeggios and things like that. You can take it in whatever direction you want. But if you go through those first few stages first, and it will take weeks and months to get there, but if you do that, you will establish a good grounding that you can use then to take your improvisation in whatever direction you want to take it in. So hopefully that was useful for you. As I say, try it out, see how it works for you. That will give you a decent grounding in where you want to go with your improvisation. Anyway, we'll chat next time. Goodbye.